Well, hello again from indoors. The- As long as there's leaves on the trees, I guess I'll be doing it from in here. But that creates a different vibe and a different energy anyway. Anyway, I want to talk about this concept of the Euclidean breakdown. That, I mean, the other day I posted videos about people walking in front of trains and accidents on the road, and people seem to have lost their spatial awareness and ability to quantify velocity and things like that. And lo and behold, another video shows up today. I shared on my Facebook page of another woman in America who came within inches of being killed by a steam train. That she was standing at the side of the track doing selfies, and only the piston rods knocked the phone out of her hand. If she had have caught her sleeve or her t-shirt in the driving rod, she would have been minced up like mincemeat and shot out. And of course, all the normies are like NPCs are all like continuing to film their selfies. But yeah, and again, there seems to be an issue with spatial awareness, velocity, uh, angular momentum, relative velocity, and all these kinds of other things that seems to be breaking down. Now, it's very easy to at first blame this on the needlecraft. And while it's possible that the needlecraft could be exacerbating the issue, is there something else at work here pertaining to the breakdown of reality, to the wave function collapse? Because it kind of explains the flat earthers to me. Like, the flat earthers don't understand, they can't even grasp what perspective is. And you'll show them examples of linear perspective, isometric, oblique perspective. And then you show them a photograph proving, like, you'll see like pylons going over the Lake Pontchartrain in the South America. Look, there's your Earth curvature, or buildings on the other side of a lake or a bay that you can only see from the fifth or sixth floor up through a telephoto lens, because the lower floors are they're hidden behind the curvature of the Earth. And they still don't get it. They still, oh, that's just perspective. And it's not perspective. That's not what perspective is at all. Now, human beings have lost the ability to know perspective in the past. And this happened, and it's funny, here we are again. When Christianity destroyed the classical world, if you look at the paintings they've uncovered in places like Pompeii, they have no problem with perspective. It's all there. They knew what perspective was. And, they could do it. And when the Christians came along and destroyed all the knowledge of the classical world, it wasn't until the Renaissance, and you had the likes of Duret and Bruno Bettelheim, who actually had to develop tools to, re-begin to understand. That's why we re-begin to understand perspective, like there would be grids with lines on them, and that's how they would begin to understand perspective again. It was like humans had lost the ability to understand perspective, and that's why paintings in the Middle Ages show like the knights or the king, and right behind him is the city walls, and it's not angled right, and it's not correct. The perspective is all wrong. Now, the rules of a lot of this stuff is geometry, so that's the basic rule of perspective is geometry. It's really that simple. And it's Pythagorean, and it's Archimedean, and specifically it's Euclidean geometry. You remember that, from school. The concept of that reality is kind of like fortified with Euclidean geometry. It's what kind of makes us comprehend this reality. And maybe the flat earthers not being able to understand Euclidean geometry or even grasp things like perspective. And even a lot of them are very rude and just like buffoons, but like some of them you'd meet would be very decent, nice people. And you'd sit down and explain to them, like, well, here's absolute, show me the curve. And it says, well, you take them to the beach on the west coast of Ireland here, where there's lots of flights across the Atlantic, and you would see what do you call it, the chemtrails or the aircraft trails bending around and looking like they were going into the sea. And I say, well, those planes are not flying into the sea. What they're doing is you're seeing them flying around the curvature of the Earth. They're gone to the other side of the ocean. And they'd be going, no, no, I don't get it. So I just gave up after a while, even trying to politely and explain it. And there was all kinds of things like that. Like they say, there's no one photograph of the Earth as a whole, as a sphere from space. There's fucking thousands of them. Well, there's at least hundreds of them. I'm sure there's thousands of them. And they say they don't exist. And I say, here they are. There's loads of them. And he pointed them and showed them. Oh, NASA, never a straight answer. I says, these are from the Russians, the Chinese, the Indians, everybody. And even nations that are hostile to the US, like Iran and China and Russia. And they still say, oh, they're all in the Illuminati, like the kind of the classic, they're all in the cabal. I was like, what? So this is what you're dealing with. They couldn't grasp the totality of this reality. They had tremendous problems, and I used to wonder about that. Was this weird? Was this poor education? Was this being hypnotized by videos on YouTube? And I think now I'm starting to wondering if there was a breakdown in Euclidean perception, and they may have been Renfielding this before it actually happened. And they also seem to have been Renfielding memory holes as well with the whole Tatarian thing. They're not intelligent enough or educated enough to understand real concepts, but they're cognitive enough to Renfield what's coming down the road. Now, we live in an age now where people, you talk to the average person in the street and you mentioning the COVID or the lockdowns and all that, and they're like, what? Huh? They don't remember. It's been memory hold. It's like the hearings coming out in Scotland. They have been memory hold. It's like that never happened in our minds. Those things never took place. Those events never took place. It's truly bizarre. And that's almost like the whole Tatarian thing was like Renfielding this inability to even understand the past anymore. And you meet normies and NPCs now, and they don't grasp the past. They don't, everything that kind of flows into one thing. They don't really understand linear time anymore. And they don't understand Euclidean geometry. Now, within the kind of new age thing, you have this whole thing that we will elevate to the fifth density, or we will somehow have a great grand convergence to take us to a new reality, a new dimension. And while on the surface that seems very appealing to people, it's ultimately rooted in the Gnostic concept of that we live, this earth is a horrible prison, and we have, the only way to escape it is by death. So when you think about it, when New Ages are going, say, I'm going to the fifth density, they're really talking about dying, death. And this whole thing, we have to escape the prison planet matrix and all this stuff. This 5 sense, what does David Guy call it? The 5 sense reality prison. Well, that's classic new age stuff. That's right up there with killing your ego. Killing your ego, or even attempting to killing your ego, is perhaps one of the most dangerous things you can do as a person. And yet the New Agers are still pushing it. You must kill your ego. You must kill. I am one. I have killed my ego. I'm one with the universe. And then you wonder why these entities are swarming into them and they're getting possessed and going mentally ill and having psychiatric breakdowns. Because you need your ego to navigate this reality that we currently live in. And I wouldn't use the term trapped, because this is the Maya. This is the illusion that we're all generating together. So it's not a prison. The idea is to generate something better, something that's less, it can't be friction free. It wouldn't work, and it can't be conflict free. It has to be dualistic to some degree in order to keep it meaningful. But the idea is to try and make it for yourself personally, to get through it as best you can. If you try to escape it by going, I have killed my ego, or else say, I'm ascending now to the fifth density. You're not, your brain is not, your nervous system is not ready for that. No one's is. Why do you think yogis spend 50 years training? A weekend course on shamanic drumming in Glastonbury won't do that for you. And so they're putting themselves in tremendous cognitive and psychiatric danger by behaving and thinking like this. But perhaps what we're seeing with the lack of spatial environmental awareness is we are probably going through the wave function collapse of some form. Well, we are. It's obvious, this is where things like Mandela effects and stuff come from. But we're going through the wave function collapse in some, and how we're noticing is in these little things. Mandela effects, people's inability to understand spatial awareness, velocity, relative velocity. You know, like you'd say to a flat earther, they'll say, well, you know, if they're traveling at 18,000 miles an hour in the space station, why don't they, in the ISS, why don't they feel it? And I says, well, because there's no resistance from air because there's in a vacuum, and then they think a vacuum is a vacuum cleaner sucking. And then I say, and secondly, there's, you know, it's relative velocity. It's the same reason why you can drink a cup of coffee on a plane going 500 miles an hour and the coffee not splashing in your face at 500 miles an hour. Relative velocity and acceleration are two very different things, and they just can't get it. And it's like now you see people, it's almost like they were rent feeling what's happening now, that we see people standing next to trains to take selfies, and they're right beside the rail, and they haven't figured out, or they should, well, they do. They might have known in the past that the train extends beyond the rail in the middle, the 4 foot 8 inch rail, or wherever the gauge is in your country on either side, and they get hit. And you see like some incredible videos, like a woman I saw, I think it was somewhere in Eastern Europe, had parked her car by a level crossing, and the back of the car was on the tracks. And she was like, no, I'm off the tracks. And the guy was saying, get off the tracks. And he ran right back, and her car was hit by a passing commuter train at speed. Again, this is a woman who was in her 60s. Now, yeah, it could be the needlecraft. Maybe they're deliberately doing it for that reason. Maybe, you know, the powers that be have a lot more insight into the stuff in terms of modifying human beings, knowing that, you know, because DNA ultimately is far more than just, you know, your heritage. It's a hell of a lot of stuff in there, and still lots that they don't know about, and they've been messing with it. But the spatial awareness thing is fascinating. And it may be as well as the lack of, you know, we're confronted today with two things, right? People who don't remember the lockdowns, or you talk about the TikTok dancing nurses, they don't remember. They don't remember being prisoner. It doesn't really, it's what? Oh yeah. It's gone. And then and it's dissolving out of their consciousness. And then you have people, the same people have lost the ability to have to understand spatial awareness and relative and, literal velocity. And they are causing enormous amount of car crashes on the roads that are happening. Now, this definitely seems to be renfielded by two things, the Totarian bunch and the Flat Earth bunch, who didn't understand perspective. Interesting, isn't it? The same people, they renfielded this before it all came into pass with the needlecraft and all and everything else, the world we live in now. So where does that leave the rest of us? Do we go along with it? And I would say no. In the same way, I would say we have to be very careful here. And that's why I think people like us who are involved in the occult have an edge on all this stuff. For instance, we understand the power of geometry, and going right back to the runes, and beyond that to the spiral lines in Neolithic cave art. We knew that geometry was somehow, the diamond patterns, that reality was somehow relevant to functioning correctly in this reality. This is why, and you have like in H.P. Lovecraft's the dreams in the witch house. It's the fact that the house in Arkham is built with non-Euclidean geometry, and there's a strange sensation of going from one room to the other that enters people into different dimensions, or more worryingly, brings in entities from the other side. And this is what we should be worried about. This is what we should, Herbert West Reanimator, we should be, from beyond this whole thing. We should be very careful that if, as the reason why in ritual magic you have all these specific and strict geometric patterns like John Dee's sigillium, pentagrams, hexagrams, Vesica Pisces, all this kind of thing, 8-pointed stars, is because they create demarcations of consciousness on the psyche that protect it. So that's even when you do a sigil that may seem, wiggly wobbly, whatever, non-Euclidean, it's still framed within a circle, and the circle is a magic circle. When the adept does the magic ritual, they're inside a magic circle of protection. That is a psychic demarcation framework, right? that allows them to keep control of the reality inside the circle. Now, if we lose the concept of non-Euclidean geometry within this present reality we're in, rather than thinking you're going, I'm going to be one with the fifth density, I'm going to like, move on. What you're doing first is, and it's funny how it's being echoed at the macrocosmic level by the open borders thing. The first magic circle is the one around you, your personal business. The second magic circle is the circumference of the walls around your house, your front door and your exterior walls. The next magic circle is the realm in which you live, whether it be a kingdom or a country. And your job you maintain psychic integration by maintaining these barriers. And what do we have at the same time that we have the psychic integration breaking down with the collapse in Euclidean formatting is we have open borders. We have open borders. This is why, and this is why, when Tolkien was writing about, you had like Gondor protecting Isgiliath at the river beyond minus third. That was a psychic barrier. It was more than just like a frontier. I've done a Vaughan on King called Nation Magic, which shows this thing. So the actual open borders thing is also a breakdown of this Euclidean integration. Now, when you start thinking about it in this way, isn't it incredibly interesting how people have lost their boundaries? Like looking for TikTok likes, looking for hearts and likes. They don't the gender thing, duality, male, female. Oh well, they're queer by flux furries. This whole thing. That's all representative of this breakdown in Euclidean formatting. So rather than getting the fifth density where everybody's like going all day and where they have fucking DMT going through their bloodstream, the exact opposite is happening. Just like Lovecraft told us, the dreams in the witch house are from beyond. The realities, the boundaries, the demarcation lines that are the protectors by virtue of Euclidean demarcations and formatting, they're breaking down and allowing all kinds of demons to get in. So, what's the answer for people like us is to absolutely maintain and don't buy into this claptrap that we have to let it go with it, man, and go into the fifth density. No, God, no. We have to be very strict. Your job now. This is why we shouldn't. This is why so many of us have given up on spending too much time out among people. That's why so many of us will only leave the front door when we have to, because we're maintaining the Euclidean security of our homes. Because out there, it's becoming increasingly non-Euclidean. And the same thing, this is why you're having these Lovecraftian type entities appearing everywhere. A friend of mine had one below. I'll put the link to it in a park in the city where they lived. And it goes on and on and on. And I tell you, we are living in amazing times, but don't get caught up in the trap that you must, go with the flow, man. This is why we have to be very careful about their personal psychic domicile frontiers more than ever, because even if it falls apart outside, we all have to sort of develop ourselves as like minor principalities and minor little statelets and kingdoms. Probably this is why the idea of the tribe developed for me during the Rona, that I was kind of like subconsciously feeling myself that they were going to break down the concept of association, by people, amongst their own people. So if you have any more thoughts about this, let me know, because I'm learning too. But I tell you, I'm seeing something here that's even the chaos star behind me, the chaos sphere, it's still Euclidean. You think about it. We have Euclidean geometry, and we have Pythagoras and Archimedes for a reason, and Newton, and they've all helped to secure us in this reality. But because science has been terrible in the last 50 years and really developed nothing new except become a government agency, we've lost, well, we haven't, but the world is rapidly losing control of its integration. See you later. Love you all.